you will see this system actually get stronger. In the case of the muscular system, we want to increase on a periodic basis the amount of weight that we do. We want to change up the volume, how much sets and reps we do, and the frequency, how many days a week we train. Those are the three variables that we need to actually manipulate, if you will, to actually get the desired objective that we're trying to do. If we're trying to increase muscle mass or try to increase strength, we want to play around with those variables. Same thing with the cardiovascular system. We want to try to vary the intensity. There's a lot of different types of training. We see people doing the same speed all the time. I'm a big component, or proponent, I should say, of the Concept 2 rower. It's basically got a little panel, and you can set up on most of the newer ones. It has, I think it's the PM3 console and even the PM4. Maybe an older version, PM2, but the console that you see right in front of you, you can set a pace boat, and you can try to keep up with the pace boat. And each month or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever, you want to change the speed of that pace boat. Or in this case, you can have it in watts, which is another way of determining load or how hard you work. And you have somebody somebody's a blowtorch at your rear end, and to try to keep you going, versus just reading a paper and doing the same thing. So I find there was a myth in the 80s, and I talked about this in my review of literature that I wrote, that I talked about earlier at UMass, is that people thought you were to work at a low intensity to burn more fat. And there's even machines that actually say that like on the ellipticals, maybe the older ones, and even some of the new machines, they'll say fat burning zone. And that all started because they thought that working out at a low intensity, your body burns preferentially more fat than it does sugar. Remember we said earlier that the body burns a combination of all three: protein, fat, and carbohydrates, mostly carbohydrates and fat. But, they were thinking that if you're at a low intensity, the body's going to burn more fat. And it's based on some physiological principles, which are very detailed, but I'll try to see if I can scale it down. There's a thing called the respiratory quotient, which basically says that if I'm at 0.07, I'm burning mostly sugar. If I'm at 1.0, I'm burning mostly fat. So they found that when they took these studies of these people working out, where they put they measured the inspired and the expired gases, and they found that at the low intensity, they were burning, on percentage standpoint, they were more at the 1.0, meaning they're burning more fat. But when you express it as a percentage, it's kind of deceiving. It's like saying, I'm going to take a test, and I'm going to have 100 questions on the test, and I get 70 right. I get a 70%. Okay? Versus if I take a test and I have 200 questions and I get 90 right, I get a lower score on a percentage, but I actually got more right. The same thing holds true with burning fat. I may look as though I'm burning less fat on a percentage standpoint. Hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying. But when you're expressing it as an absolute value, you're burning more calories and more fat when you're working at a higher level of intensity. But the thing is, you don't want to work out at a high intensity right away. You want to slowly ramp up the level of intensity. But you want to get more fit, you're going to burn more fat. Plain and simple. A term that we use in physiology called the V.O2 max, which is the maximum volume of oxygen that you can take in 1 minute. That is the most, one of the most highest predictors of your fitness level. There's another thing called the anaerobic threshold I won't get into, but this particular VO2 max, the higher your stamina level, in other words, the more fit you are and the more calories you burn throughout the day. So with strength training, you burn more calories by increasing your lean body mass, muscle. And then when you're in terms of cardiovascular exercise, you don't necessarily need to put on muscle to burn more calories as long as your stamina level is high. So if you can work on increasing your stamina, and basically what that means is if you do a mile and you can do it in 12 minutes, let's say, and you're walking it and you're doing it in 12 minutes, well, that's after 3 or 4 weeks. Let's see if we can let's see if we can walk that mile in 10 minutes or 11 minutes. So, or if we're running and we run an 8-minute mile, or a 9-minute mile, let's say 8.5-minute mile. And after 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, we'll see if we can get into the 7 range by going faster. So we're doing more work, basically. So if you can get more work done, you're going to actually see a change in your metabolic rate, which is going to increase your stamina, or VO2 max, and it's going to have profound changes in your body composition, meaning you're going to burn fat and increase muscle, especially if you're doing strength training. So to wrap this up, you want to try to, and again, you want to do this gradually. I don't want people to start saying, "Oh, I did a mile yesterday at 10 miles an hour at 10 minutes. I'm gonna do now 7 minutes." You know, I want to do it gradually over time. You don't want to break the 10% rule. You don't want to, meaning that you don't want to go. You don't want to increase. You don't want to decrease your mileage too soon, or you don't want to decrease. You don't want to increase your speed so quickly, like going from 9 miles an hour, 6 miles an hour to like 10 miles an hour. So the strength training portion of it, I'm going to have 3 exercises, and I actually got it from